Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, conference, for this, for the invitation to speak to you. I found that particularly poignant when I was watching it over the weekend, because in there you'll have spotted Superintendent Jerry Richardson, who was superintendent in Blackpool and was murdered on duty on the 23rd of August 1971. Particularly poignant for me because in 1999 I took over the role of superintendent in Blackpool. His memory lives on. Blackpool Divisional Headquarters is based on Jerry Richardson Way. And I was thinking about him over the weekend. He was murdered by a guy called Frederick Sewell, who said in his trial of Jerry Richardson, "I shall see him every day of my life. He just kept coming. He was too brave." What the video told me, reminded me, and hopefully you as well, is of the pivotal role of superintending ranks as leaders in policing. On Saturday next week, on the 14th of September, it will be 10 years since I was appointed Chief Constable of Staffordshire. And in that 10 years, I reflect on a time when taking up that role pre-austerity, pre-College of Policing, pre-police and crime commissioners, pre-many of the reforms that have taken place across policing since then. It has been a tough decade for policing. Austerity has left its mark, and we are now charged with looking at how we collectively rebuild policing. A lot has changed. There are fewer people dealing with demand that's rapidly changing, becoming more complex. I'm acutely aware of the accountability of police leaders. I don't need to tell this audience, but it feels to me that police leaders have never been more exposed, never felt more accountable, never been open to as much public scrutiny, public questioning. Being a public leader, being a public sector leader, brings with it the requirement to be accountable. But I sense in the last 10 years that that is being felt far more keenly than it was. But in that 10 years, when so much has changed, there has been a constant. And this is the role of you as leaders. I have said it before many times, and I'll say it again from this platform. Chief Constables can achieve nothing without the active support and engagement of superintendents. You develop, interpret, translate policy to ensure that the people you lead are effectively deployed. You play a crucial part in protecting and promoting what's best about policing. You lead change, the most demanding challenge that a leader faces. You set a tone for professionalism. You inspire people to be the best that they can be. Your everyday role is a necessary and important assurance of high standards. You lead challenging and high-risk policing operations. You lead complex and multifaceted investigations. Whilst your numbers have reduced, I'll say a little bit more about this in a moment, you continue to work under great pressure. You carry an increasing burden of operational risk, being called upon to lead in the most challenging of circumstances. So I start what I have to say by acknowledging your role in the leadership of the service, for thanking you and the people you represent for what you do, and committing the College of the Policing to continue to seek to support you. I want to say a few words about the college. When I came into the college, I had a good look at what we were doing and what we were focusing on. The college was born in 2012. It was born of many parents. And like any child that's born of many parents, it's bound to disappoint some of them when it grows up. It is without doubt a challenge for the college to connect better with policing. I've said that publicly, I'll say it again. We are striving to connect as well as we can possibly do so with policing, particularly people who are involved in frontline roles. And my sense when I went into the college was one of the reasons I think the college was struggling to connect with some people and some parts of policing was that it wasn't clear and confident about its role. It was doing lots and lots of things. And by the way, there are brilliant people working in the college, and I'm very proud to work with them. Some great things were happening, but I sensed that we didn't have the clarity and the direction that people in policing required, that staff in the college required. And so I set about very early on to try and crystallize our priority areas, and there are three. I want to say a little bit about each of our three priority areas. And by the way, there will be an opportunity to take questions and comments after I've spoken, so please be thinking of them. I am always up for a conversation. So there are three areas that we now are primarily focused on. The first is knowledge. So the college is the place that builds the knowledge base for policing. What works? And I'm not just talking now about 6-year longitudinal studies that come out copper-bottomed and peer-reviewed from universities. I want us to get to a place where we are the people who allow for the sharing of knowledge across policing, for promising ideas. If something is working well for a PCSO dealing with antisocial behaviour in Taunton, I want PCSO in Penrith to have access to what that promising idea looks like. And we are thinking now about how we move knowledge around the service in a much more user-friendly, adaptable, progressive way. As part of the development of knowledge, there is a big gap in policing. I saw this when I was at HMI. And what I observed there when I was doing efficiency inspections across policing, and Paul was assisting me on those when we were going through it, it was very clear that forces are now generally pretty good at understanding demand. What's coming through the door hour by hour, day by day. But there are two areas where forces were less sure-footed. Firstly, it was in the identification of latent demand. That's demand that's not reported to the police. It might not be reported at all, or it might be reported to partner organisations. And only the best forces were good at identifying that demand. But the big gap in policing, and it remains a gap, is futures work. What does the future hold? How can we forecast what life will be like in 10, 15 years' time? And at the moment, there is nobody in policing working on that important area. The reason it's important is twofold. One, although there has been an announcement of 20,000 extra officers, very welcome, I'm going to say a bit more about that in a second, working on the spending review is always too difficult for policing. We find it too hard to paint a picture of what life will be like in the future to make the case to Treasury as to why policing needs more resources. Other departments are much better at this than the Home Office and policing. So we need to develop the capability between us of saying what the demand will look like in the future. The second reason this is important is about how we build a capable workforce. If we are to build a capable workforce, we have to know what they are capable of. So building capability is predicated on an understanding of what future demand is. I'm going to be saying quite a bit about capability this afternoon, because my strong sense is that workforce planning in policing has predominantly, for very good reason, over the past 10 years that I've been involved in it as a chief officer, that workforce planning has predominantly been about capacity. And I was one of those chiefs. I'm not being critical, because at a time of austerity, chiefs were having to work out how many people they can afford. If you go round forces across chief officer rooms, there was how many police officers they can afford, how many police staff, how many PCSOs, and working all that out, predominantly been about capacity building or capacity retention. I believe that the same level of developed thinking has to go into building capability. We need to think in a much more mature way across policing around what a capable workforce will look like going forward, what the mix of skills will be needed. Not just the skills employed within a police force, but those skills that chief constables may need access to, employed by other people. So there's a gap. So knowledge development is really important, the futures work is really important, and I see the college stepping into that space more and more. Secondly, the second of our three areas, the first one's knowledge, the second area is setting standards. We, in law, have been charged with as being the body for setting standards for policing. These are standards for individuals who may seek to join policing, who may seek to advance through promotion, to develop specialist skills, or to continue to develop in role. We are charged with setting the standards for those people, and we work very closely with NPCC, with staff associations and trade unions to support that role. We also set national operational standards, working again with NPCC colleagues and staff associations for the various elements of that we're involved in. So standard setting is something I'm really proud is owned by the College of Policing, and we will seek to continue to do that in a way which you can influence. The third area is around how we support the workforce in policing. How do we support the development of a capable workforce? And this is, of course, about developing skills and an approach to continuous professional development, but also means enhancing the well-being of the service so that the contribution of officers and staff can be optimized. It's about promoting inclusion and diversity. It's about helping leaders to develop and, as I say, having a much more systematic and coherent approach to CPD. Again, I think historically there has probably been too much emphasis on the college being independent. We are part of policing. So when I left Staffordshire to become an HMI, I had to hand over my warrant card, and I operated as an HMI under a royal warrant. And when I became chief exec of the college, I had to be sworn in again as a police officer. I went to Willesden Green Magistrates Court with a bunch of recruits from the Met, was sworn in, and I was wished a long and happy career by the chair of the bench. I had to tell her it was all behind me. But we are part of policing. I'm a chief constable, not a chief constable owning a force anymore, but I am very proud of the fact that I am a chief constable and we are part of policing. And we want to make sure that we are absolutely imbued with the policing vocation. That's why I'm doing this job. I'm doing this job because I am absolutely committed to the vocation that policing has of keeping people safe. And our role is to support policing, to help the service keep people safe going forward. In order to do that, I emphasize again the fact that we need to connect. So this year, we have been in the college about setting out our priority areas, and I hope that that will begin to give more focus to the work that we have going to be undertaking going forward, and it's all available in our plan on a page, which you can see on our website. So to the 20,000 extra officers Operation Uplift, I, along with other leaders across policing, welcome, of course I do, the 20,000 additional officers. As you know, the scale of recruitment proposed by government is unprecedented in modern times. And clearly, there have been a number of driving factors as to why this announcement has been made. You will all have your own take on that. But what I commend at this conference is the work of this association, who have doggedly pointed out to government for many years the fact that the service is under-resourced, there are gaps in capability, and more are needed. And that work has often gone unnoticed, it's often gone unheralded, it is commendable to the people involved in this association that work has persevered and is bearing fruit today. And let me be very clear that the expansion of policing has to be across the totality of policing if it is to be effective. And that is why I would support the case for more superintendents. New recruits and existing officers must be well led and inspired by those who have got the capacity and the capability to do so, to model the skills and behaviours, to develop the well-being, to enhance the diversity, all those things that leaders will be doing going forward. In order to do that, I, as I say, support the case for more people in superintending ranks. And I know there are all sorts of cases made that have been made during the time of austerity that superintendents have taken a disproportionate hit in relation to numbers. And I think that is something that needs to be rectified. Exact force allocations of the additional numbers, as the Home Secretary said this morning, will be matter for the Home Secretary, and Chief Constables will continue to have discretion regarding local recruitment. We are there at the centre, working with NPCC, working with the Home Office to ensure that the coordination of this is in place. The benefits are considerable. The potential benefits are considerable. Of course, additional numbers, enhancing public safety, is a huge benefit to the public. But we have got a massive opportunity to attract and nurture new talent, to bring in new skills into policing, and we have got a fantastic opportunity to address diversity. Diversity in policing is about enhancing policing legitimacy. It's not an add-on, it's not a nice to have, it is central to the policing mission. I read this week a quote that trust, upon which policing is, of course, built in the UK policing model, that trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. We need to continue to work really hard with our communities to enhance the trust and confidence that gives policing in the UK its legitimacy. We cannot do that unless we are demonstrably more diverse. We cannot let this opportunity slip through our fingers. And so the challenge for us, the benefits for us in policing are very, very significant, and we need to work really hard. We cannot, and I have said this to Home Office, to ministers, we cannot dilute quality. This is, of course, very much about widening the gate and not lowering the bar. We need to bring people into policing who are of the quality that the public have the right to deserve. The programme director is DCC Jeanette McCormack, who is seconded from the College of Policing. I'm really pleased that we are in the heart of this effort to pull together and coordinate the work that Martin Hewitt is acting as the senior responsible officer. I know Martin's going to speak to you tomorrow. He and I are absolutely at one on this in terms of the opportunities that it presents. The capacity issue is huge. We know that. That case is well made. I want to argue that at the same time, we do not neglect capability. So let me say a little bit more about the capable workforce. First of all, I'm delighted to introduce a new toolkit for superintendents today. I'm going to say a little bit more about that. But let me say something first of all about continuous professional development. The police service is 1,000,000 miles away from where it needs to be in relation to CPD. We need a step change in our approach to how we look upon our own professional development. An anecdote that I have shared with others, let me share it with you, is that a few months ago I met an old school friend for a drink, and he is a consultant anaesthetist. And I was talking about CPD and policing and the fact that working in the college, I need to start understanding how we can be much more systematic about this going forward. So he brings out his phone, he goes on the Royal College of Anaesthetists app, and he shows me the CPD he has done this year, what he's required to do by the end of the year, patient feedback about him. We are nowhere near that. I said to him, well, of course, you've been up this for donkey's years, so you're bound to be good at it. In fact, medics have not been at it for donkey's years. It was introduced after Harold Shipman. And what medics realized as a result of Shipman was that you could qualify and then you go about your practice and nobody shows that much interest in your professional development until somebody goes rogue. Does that ring a bell? Because I think an approach to professional development which is systematic and coherent requires us in the service to think about how we bring people in, how we accredit them, how they qualify, and how we develop their skills consistently throughout their time in a fast-moving world. We cannot just leave this to organic development. That is complacent. Again, I go back to my time as an HMI, and I can say with great confidence, having inspected forces, that there is no force that is brilliant at PDR. PDR is seen as a bureaucratic add-on for most people in policing. So this approach to CPD requires a cultural change. And a cultural change requires individual leaders to take it on. And that's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for everybody in this room. It's certainly a challenge for me. Because we need it. There's a time imperative on this, because of course pay progression in the future will be linked to people being signed off as being competent. And that will require forces to have arrangements in place where they can say that with some authority and with some evidence. So a personal challenge to everybody, it's a challenge that I present to myself, is how committed are you to your professional development? How do you as a leader act as a role model in relation to your commitment to your professional development? How do you act as an association, as a conscience to policing in this case? How can you be a pain in the neck around requiring a more systematic approach? Again, I want to work with you to work on this. But there are some green shoots. So I'm really pleased. For example, tomorrow, the elective sessions here will be certificated and will be seen as part of your professional development. That's a first. Excuse me. We're also really pleased that following a lengthy consultation with the association and a 2-year collaboration, that today we can launch the Superintendent's Toolkit, something which will allow you, in a way that you've said you want, to access your learning and development digitally. If you go to the College of Policing stand, we've got a bumper number of staff waiting to showcase how this works. So please get familiar with it, take it back to your forces, share it with your colleagues. We need to start this journey of being much better at this. And of course, the learning isn't just digital. We're also running 27 events around the country, face-to-face workshops. 2,000 tickets have been available to this. Most of these workshops are now sold out. But they're looking at leadership capabilities. They're looking at training and teams and performance, strategic influencing, change management, well-being and resilience. This is the sort of stuff that I think you deserve, you require, and we need to make sure that we are sufficiently fleet of foot in the college to support you with it. I've also been really proud of the work that we have done together around the coaching and mentoring program. We have seen 770 leaders across policing trained as coaches, each with a personal commitment to coach 3 colleagues from underrepresented groups. An independent evaluation of this program is really positive, not just for the person being coached, but for the coaches themselves. Well, we've moved this on really systematically between us, and I'm very grateful for that connection. We're also developing an online coaching toolkit that sets out what coaches can do and what they can expect. It will also build up a database of coaches so that you can choose who you want to support you, and you can point your staff to people who can support them in their development. We in the college have the Leadership Hub available now, looking at widening the pipeline of people who want to progress, people who may never have thought that senior positions are for them. How do we get that talent? How do we bring it through? How do we nurture it? How do we support people to be the leaders that the future requires? Because the leaders of the future will necessarily be different, have different skill sets, have different attributes to the leaders of the past. So CPD, I am saying, needs a significant turn of the dial. And I am very, very serious about that challenge for policing, and I want to work with the service to improve it. The second part of building a capable workforce is the approach to well-being that I think we have begun to pick up. And again, I know the Home Secretary touched on this morning. I'm really pleased that the college has been working with Andy Rhodes, the NPCC lead for well-being, to build an approach to well-being which is more systematic across policing. I understand that Paul has said this morning that 63% of your members are experiencing stress and mental health issues. And it stands to reason to me that there is a really self-evident business case, not just in terms of caring for the people that we lead, that is a moral responsibility, but it's also about optimizing the contribution of people. If people are feeling healthy, if they're feeling well, they will contribute more to keeping the public safe going forward. So the approach to well-being will look at leadership, will look at individual resilience, peer support, psychological risk management, well-being reviews for forces, and really great to have already in place an outreach service for well-being. There are 4 vehicles already present. There'll be 10 by the end of the year, and they can be deployed to situations and events where they can be of best use. 2 vans, for example, were deployed recently to the tragic murder of PC Andrew Harper. And hopefully people on the ground, real time, can get the support that they deserve. You would expect me to say something about PEQF, which I will do. I see this as part of building a capable workforce for policing. Just a reminder of where we are. IPLDP, by common consent, is no longer fit for purpose. It needs modernising. You do not need a degree to join the police. Under the new arrangements, you will not need a degree to join the police. It's really important that we remember that. But what we have come to is an understanding that if you are to train people as a constable, we didn't start by saying, what degree course can we think of? We started by saying, how do we best prepare people to be an effective constable at a time of increased demand, when they're out there managing complexity, leading partnerships, problem solving, having huge amounts of discretion over their fellow citizen. And when you look at the training required to make somebody fit for purpose for that role, and you accredit that training, the accreditation comes out at degree level. It starts that way round. We need to do the right thing by preparing people properly for policing. It isn't about bringing academics into policing. It isn't about saying the current workforce are all thick. Quite the opposite, actually. What I'm saying is that the current workforce of constables, good constables, are working with a degree of complexity that they deserve to be better recognised. And I'm really pleased that the predominantly, overwhelmingly, chief constables are taking this forward. People are concerned and have said to me that if you train people and give them a degree, they'll go off and get a better job. Henry Ford said, the only thing worse than training people and them moving on is not training them and them staying. We need to build a capable workforce that is fit for the future, and that will challenge traditional ways that we have done things. 11 forces already are in train with the police constable degree apprenticeship, 6 more by the end of the year. There'll be 31 forces live with this by June next year. 3 forces already are live with the degree holder entry program, 22 by June next year. If you don't know the detail on what the new entry routes are, I plead with you, familiarise yourself with it. Because what I see, particularly on social media, is a lot of uninformed challenge. I don't mind anybody disagreeing with this stuff. We can have mature disagreements. But when those disagreements are based upon poorly informed, then that becomes problematic. And as leaders in the service, I think we have a shared responsibility to familiarise ourselves with the detail. Quick word now on building diversity. Again, a huge part of building a capable workforce. There are too few women and colleagues from BAME backgrounds progressing to the most senior positions in policing. I've already referred to the joint work between the college and the Superintendents Association, but we need to do more on this. We need to think how we challenge ourselves. We need to think about how we challenge people around us to be thinking in a much more progressive way about how we encourage people to join policing and how we encourage them to bring through. A reminder, I consider this to be a hugely important issue of legitimacy. So I want to finish by thanking you again for the work that you do. Thanking you for the roles that you play. You have a hugely important part in helping to rebuild policing in a way which is capable and fit for the future. That means it cannot be the same as the police force of the past. As brilliant as that was, that will not be able to deal with new demands. We need new skills. It seems that self-evident to me. So we need to think about how we do that. Policing traditionally thinks in terms of training. The very first question I get asked is, what will the abstractions be? And I get that. I do understand it. But we are a profession that traditionally looks upon training as a cost and not an investment. And we need to think much more about how we invest in our staff for them to get to be as prepared as they need to be for the future. The challenges of austerity will not recede quickly. We need to move forward, but I am very comforted by the fact that I think there is a renewed emphasis on policing bodies at the centre of policing, working together, and that includes the staff associations, includes the work that Paul's doing. I see John Apter in the back. I know that there is joint concerted effort to work collectively in the future for building the service that we need. I think that the localism agenda that we have seen as being the mantra of previous Home Secretaries will change. And I think there is much more interest now in how we work as a collective across policing, respecting local differences, of course. But how do we build the best police service across the UK? We need to build a service for the future, and we need to build it with great care, and we need to build it at pace. I thank your national officers, Paul and your team, for the support and challenge that you give to us in the College of Policing. Our products benefit greatly from your active involvement in it, and long may that continue. Thanks very much for listening to me, and I'm very prepared to take your observations or questions. Thank you.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. And as Mike said, we have got a few minutes for questions, so please start putting your hands up. I have been keeping an eye on the app, and there are a couple on there, but if anybody would like to kick us off in person, great. If we could get a microphone down to the front here. Anybody else after that? And we could get a microphone to the chap in the yellow tie. Sorry, my eyesight's not good enough to be any more specific. Sir.
Hello, Simon Ovens. I'm from the Met Police. Time and time, I want to talk about diversity and recruitment. So time and time again, I hear chief officers link an increase in recruitment of BME people with some concept of lowering the bar or not lowering the bar, as if the two things are inclusive. And you said it in your speech. They are not inclusive, and I think we need to put that type of language behind us. Time and time again, I hear chief officers say we must do something about BME recruitment, yet at a time when we're seeing a reduction in that, I think, and people leaving a BME background through all ranks, up to and including our own. And I wonder two things. One, what ideas does the College of Policing actually have to do something about it, rather than saying we must do something about it? What ideas are in place? And secondly, where would you stand personally in the idea of lobbying for a change in the law to allow positive discrimination rather than just action? Because as we heard our own commissioner say a few months ago, if we don't do something, in 100 years' time, we may just be reaching where we are now, which clearly isn't acceptable.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And I think your points are all absolutely spot on. If I can take the positive discrimination point first. A personal view is that I am not a supporter of positive discrimination. I can actually see the arguments why, and I think it's really legitimate for people to be asking that question, why don't you consider it? Because as Cressida has pointed out, and you've alluded to it, you know, that if we carry on at the rate we've been going at, we'll be having this conversation in decades to come. But the reason I'm not persuaded by positive discrimination is that I don't think it solves the problem. If you look at, is there anyone here from PSNI? So colleagues, George Hamilton gave an input to a Chiefs Council and talked about the experience of positive discrimination in PSNI. You'll know more about it than I do. But to bring in Roman Catholics into the police service of Northern Ireland. And it worked. It did bring in larger numbers. But as soon as the positive discrimination stopped, so did the Roman Catholics joining the PSNI. It didn't actually solve the problem, solve the cultural issue, solve the challenges. It's a little bit like me. Do you know when we went through a phase where we allowed people to work in specialist roles for a fixed period of time and then they had to move on? It was nearly like you mandate things because it does away with the requirement for leaders to lead and sort this out. So I do recognise why people would call for it. Personally, I'm not persuaded by it. Don't think it solves the problem. In relation to what do we do to bring more people in, what we have seen works, but it's in pockets, is local attraction. So chiefs will say, leave us to work out the attraction locally and do really wacky things in our communities that we can actually go out there that people wouldn't otherwise have thought of. So what we need to do is not pretend that we are the people who have all the wisdom here. We're not. We need to identify those pockets of practice that have done well, and we need to make sure they're no longer pockets of practice. And our role is to spread that knowledge out.
Excellent. I know that we're severely short on time.
Sorry.
We'll take the... yes, sir.
I'll keep it brief. I was really taken with the point around the comparison with the health service and CPD. I heard a doctor once say that they spend approximately 30% of their time on CPD. Just wondered if any work has been done to compare how much time policing spends on CPD currently and where we should be.
Can I add a little? I was thinking very similar things when I was listening to you talk about the anaesthetist. But if I was right when I was listening to you, I think you then went on to say, this is a job for individual leaders to show leadership. But it sounded to me like the anaesthetist, that was across the industry model. And so those two things seem to me not to quite fit. Is it up to individual leaders or is it up to the whole force?
Yeah, so it's up to first of all, I think there should absolutely be a national requirement and a professional requirement on CPD. What exactly that looks like, I'm not sure at the moment, and I'm sure there will be work about the amount of time that policing currently takes on this. But we need to set much more of a national requirement, point one. Point two, that this will come alive, this is my point about individual leaders, by individual leaders demonstrating that it can and should be done. Because that's the way all national initiatives do work. It's normally by people championing them locally to demonstrate how effective they can be.
Any other burning questions from the floor? I've got a couple on the app, which I will have a quick... Oh, yes, there is. Apologies. Can we get the microphone to the back there?
I'm not sure if it is working. Tracy Edwards from the Metropolitan Police. I have a question as to how much work or research is being done to compare the numbers of cadets from BAME communities and when they leave their cadetship. We don't seem to follow on and have the same amount of take-up. So I am looking at data from some years ago, being almost equal numbers at the 16-year-old stage, but they then don't go on to join us at 18. And I wonder if anyone has had a look at why that is, and could we do more, particularly with the 20,000, whether we could do more to make that number much better.
Thanks, Tracy. I simply don't know the answer to that question, but I will look at it. It's an interesting question. I wasn't aware of those statistics, but I know Nathan's just written that down, so thank you for asking it.
Right, I'm going to quickly rattle through these. Two questions I'm going to pick out. Simon says, how will COP seek to improve to ensure that standards in different disciplines complement rather than contradict each other? And Nagari, I hope I've pronounced that right, knowledge and standards overlap with other bodies, HMIC, MPCC, occasionally the IOPC. How can the college take the lead, or do you not believe that the lead should be with the college?
So on the standards, Nairi, yes, the college definitely should be. In statute, we are the lead agency. What I think, and the point I was trying to get to before, is that I think that more than any other time that I can recall, and I've been in national policing, this is my second national policing role, there is a recognition that national policing bodies have got to sort this out. At the moment, there's lots of blurred edges around where we start and NPCC finish and vice versa. Martin and I are really clear about this. We need to sort out how we complement each other. But there is a real willingness to do that and to get around the table. So the National Policing Board will help that. I'm really a big supporter of that conceptually as to what we individually bring to the party. In terms of standards not competing, so our role will be not just the development of standards, but the kind of the choreographing of that, if you like. It will be a big challenge because I get the point around things sometimes bumping up against each other. So we've got a bit of sorting out to do on that, but it will be a role for us at the centre to try and make some sense of that.
I think that's my cue to draw this session to a close. I think a lot of ground was covered, a lot of questions were asked, some you're going to come back with the answers, but we really appreciate you being here and all that you said and the questions you answered. Please give Mike Cunningham a big round of applause as he leaves the stage.